Hello, good evening, and welcome to the 8 Keys to Naturalised English Speech, week 2 of our speech and drama lessons. So if you've tuned in before, or if you haven't, these are free every week. It's usually 6 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time. We're a bit late tonight. It's 20 past 6. Sorry about that. We just had some technical problems. But these are half-hour lessons for free for anyone who wants to join in. Speech and drama lessons specifically designed for English second language learners. So if you fall into that category, or if you are anyone and you'd like to do a speech and drama lesson, come and join me at this time. So let's begin. Now, last week we did our first lesson, and I sort of talked through the format of how this works. In case you already watched that one, I won't go into as much detail, but I'll still explain in case we've got some new viewers. So speech and drama as a subject is about the voice and speaking and the clarity of your speaking, but also it's about using those things to speak poetry and prose and doing drama, using your voice and your expression for those things. And so you get to practice your speech and you get to learn a bit about English literature in the process. So we're going to start with breathing. Now, I explained last week that the voice all starts with breath. When we talk about the formation of the voice, it starts with our breathing. The breath then travels up to our vocal cords, which vibrate, and that produces a sound. But at first the sound is very small, and then that needs to be amplified or made bigger. So it picks up resonance in different places, in the cavities in the face, in the head, the nasal cavities. So we do exercises specifically to learn how to use those resonating cavities well. And then the fourth part of the voice is the way you form the sounds with your speech organs, which are the lips, the teeth, the tongue. And so all of these parts come into play in the way you speak. So we're just going to start with breath for today. Now, last week I talked about the correct way to breathe, which is called intercostal diaphragmatic breathing, which is when you use your intercostal muscles, which are between your ribs. And the lower two ribs actually they're able to swing outwards. So when you breathe in, they swing out to bring in the most amount of air. And the diaphragm is a muscle that's shaped like this, just underneath the ribs. And when you breathe in, it goes downwards. Like, wait a second, I have to stand up to show you. Like this, to bring in the most amount of air. So I want you to put your hand on that place on yourself, sort of there. Sorry, it doesn't quite fit in this screen. And we're going to, first of all, we're just going to do some breathing. Now, the idea is that when you breathe, you should be able to feel your diaphragm area moving in and out like this. Hopefully you can see my hand moving a little bit there. You shouldn't see your shoulders rising. You don't want that to happen. That's not desirable. So with your hand on that part of your body, let's do some breathing in. So first of all, we're going to breathe in very deeply and see if you can make yourself yawn. Try and yawn. When you yawn, it actually opens up your lungs the most they can be opened up. So let's try that one more time. So breathing in. Oh, see if you can make yourself yawn. You might feel silly, but at least no one's watching you. So don't feel silly. All right. Next time, we're going to breathe in again. I'm going to breathe out on a sigh. One more time. Breathe in. We're going to do this a few times, each time breathing out on a sigh. And when you do, just let your voice be whatever is a naturally low pitch for you. So don't try and be lower than you are or higher, just a comfortable, fairly comfortable, natural low pitch. So let's do that a few times. One more time. Oh, we've got a comment here. Yes, a comment saying you didn't realize that practicing your breathing would help your speech, and that's true. A lot of people don't think about that, but it is the very foundational step for your speaking voice, because if you don't breathe well, you can't get the maximum amount of resonance, and then your voice will be thin, won't be very, you can't speak with confidence. So it's all part of learning to speak well, learning to speak any language. Thank you for your your joining in. Okay, so now we're going to do the exercise we did last week, where I want you to breathe in and I'll count. So we're going to breathe in for 2, out for 2, then in for 3 and out for 3. I'm going to count and just try and follow along with me. So we'll breathe in, 1, 2, and out, 1, 2. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, and out, 1, 2, 3. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, and out, 1, 2, 3, 4. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last one. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How did you go? Did you get to the end of that? It's okay if you didn't. With all of these exercises, if you try it and it's just really hard and you can't do it, it's fine, because that's why we practice anything, is we get better as we practice. Okay, this time we're going to breathe in again, and then we're going to breathe out on a hum. Again, I want you to choose a pitch that's comfortable for you. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. The pitch I'm doing is a comfortable pitch for me, but all of our voices are different. So just a comfortable pitch. So breathing in and out on a hum. Now, the reason I've got my hands on my face is that if you do that, you can feel the resonance in your face, okay? Like I said, after we breathe, the first step is breathing. The second step is the vibration of the vocal cords, which makes the small sound. And the third step is the resonance. So when we hum, we're feeling for the vibrations, and that's showing us where we have resonance in our face. So this time, let's try that again. You can feel in different places on your face. Again, you might feel silly, but at least no one's watching. And see if you can feel the vibrations. If you can't feel them in a place, again, that's okay. Ideally, the more you practice, you'll be able to feel the resonance in all the different areas, all the different resonating cavities. But at the start, maybe you can't. So that's okay. So let's breathe in and hum. And again, in. Now, these sorts of exercises, we actually practice for 20 minutes, sometimes longer, in speech and drama. People who train as actors might do this for hours to practice using their voice. We won't do that now because we don't have time, and I want to get onto some other things. But you can practice these exercises yourself in your own time. And like any kind of exercise, the longer you practice it, the better you'll get. With that one, it's one of the hardest places that people often find to feel the vibrations is here. This can take a lot of practice. So if you didn't feel it there, don't be discouraged. With practice, you'll be able to. Okay, let's move on. So we've done the first part of the speech and drama lesson, which is our voice warm-ups. We're now going to move to the speech warm-ups. So after the voice is formed, it vibrates in the vocal cords, we pick up resonance, and then we form the sounds with our lips, our teeth, and our tongue. And this is the part in particular that if you are a speaker of another language, it can be difficult because every language has different sounds. Perhaps your language has different sounds from English. So this is why a really important thing to practice to form the sounds well. Oh, thank you. Oh, good. Yes, we've got one viewer. Yes, and absolutely, the more you practice it, as with these speech exercises, the better you'll get, and the more of a full voice you'll get. And actually, with the resonance, I mentioned this last week, but in case you haven't watched that lesson, the more of the resonating cavities you can use, the more rich voice you will have. When you hear people with really beautiful, deep, rich voices, it's because they're using all of the resonating cavities really well. So that's what you get out of practicing. Okay, we're going to do some speech exercises. Now, I'm going to do some tongue twisters today. I'll say them, but I'm going to just put them in the comments here so you can copy along. So let me just copy the first one. Now, this one is not only a good speech exercise, but it's also a good life principle. And is it letting me copy? Let me just try. Oh, there we go. Sorry, my computer was stuck for a moment. So here's our first tongue twister. Don't go deep into debt. Don't go deep into debt. Now, with any tongue twisters, when we practice them, the idea is to really form the sounds very strongly because you're trying to exercise your speech organs. Again, like any exercise, if you were practicing running or if you were practicing swimming or basketball, you want to really push yourself. You don't want to just sort of practice basketball. You want to do as well as you can. And it's the same with these. So you've got to try and pronounce the sounds as clearly as you can. So I'll say this, you can say it with me, and we'll get a bit faster as we go. Okay. 1, 2. Don't go deep into debt. 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 That's enough for today. For that one, we're going to do more. Again, you can practice these more. They're all good tongue twisters to use. Now, here is our next one. I'll copy it here into the comments. Ensuring excellence isn't easy. Lots of vowel sounds in this one to practice. So again, say with me, ensuring excellence isn't easy. I said it wrong that time. Ensuring excellence isn't easy. 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 One last time. Ensuring excellence isn't easy. So that's quite hard. A lot of these, when you look at them, they might not look hard, but they're difficult to say. So good to practice. And one last tongue twister for today to warm up our speech organs. And I'll just copy it here into the chat. Feel free to follow that fellow. Let's say it together. Feel free to follow that fellow. 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 Okay, we're going to get faster. Feel free to follow that fellow. 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 Again, if you can't do it that fast, that's okay. Just do it as fast as you can. And the more you practice, the better you'll be able to use your speech organs. Okay, the next part of our speech and drama lesson for today is poetry. Now, I talked last week about how in speech and drama, we use poetry very often. And part of the reason is that it's great to study literature, and it also teaches you a lot about the language and the culture that you're trying to study. You learn a lot about the way people use the words. And also, part of the reason we use poetry is that often it's good to practice for speech because the sounds, the way the poetry is written, it uses a lot of assonance, which is when the same vowel sounds are used. So it makes for really good practice. Now, we're doing a poem today, which is called It Was Long Ago. I'm just going to copy the link to the poem here. I won't copy the whole poem because it's quite long. So if you're following along, you can go to that link and find that poem. And now this poem is about somebody remembering something from their childhood that's quite beautiful. And I don't know what sorts of things you remember from your childhood, but sometimes there are moments. You might not remember the exact scene as it played out, but you might remember a moment of a tree or a moment of a cat, which is what happens in this poem. Now, when we read poetry, when there is punctuation at the end of a line, we stop. When there's no punctuation, often we continue on. And the poet writes it like this in English poetry so that we know that the sense continues on. If you stop, it won't make sense. It won't be logical. For instance, if I stop when I'm talking, it doesn't make sense. And that's what it sounds like in poetry if you stop in the wrong places. So when there's no punctuation at the end of the line, you continue on. But in order to continue the rhythm of the poem, you sort of hold that sound for a moment rather than just rushing through. So if you're following along with the poem, go to that link and we'll read it through. And as I said last week, when we read poetry in English, we always start with the title and the author. So I'll do that. And then I'm going to read the poem to you. Now, if you want, you can read along at the same time as me, or the first time you can listen, and then you can do it the second time. This poem's a bit longer than the one we did last week, so we're probably only going to have time to do it twice for today. But again, you can replay this lesson later and practice, or you can practice without the lesson. All right, let's go. It Was Long Ago by Eleanor Farjeon. I'll tell you something, shall I? Something I remember. Something that still means a great deal to me. It was long ago. A dusty road in summer, I remember. A mountain and an old house and a tree that stood, behind the house. An old woman, I remember, in a red shawl with a grey cat on her knee, humming under a tree. She seemed the oldest thing I can remember. But then perhaps I was not more than 3. It was long ago. I dragged on the dusty road, and I remember how the old woman looked over the fence at me and seemed to know how it felt to be 3, and called out, I remember, "Do you like bilberries and cream for tea?" I went under the tree, and while she hummed and the cat purred, I remember how she filled a saucer with berries and cream for me so long ago. Such berries and such cream as I remember I have never seen before and never see today, And that is almost all I can remember. The house, the mountain, the grey cat on her knee, her red shawl and the tree, and the taste of the berries, and the feel of the sun, I remember, and the smell of everything that used to be so long ago. Till the heat on the road outside again, I remember, and how the long dusty road seemed to have for me no end, That is the farthest thing I can remember. It won't mean much to you. It does to me. Then I grew up, you see. And that's our poem. So when you listen to me read that, hopefully you can hear how I'm drawing out some of the long vowels, even more than I do in normal speech. It's really important to do that in poetry. And also the way that I'm carrying on the lines that don't have punctuation at the end. We actually call that enjambment in poetry. But if you don't remember that word, that's okay. So carrying on the lines, holding the long vowels, and trying to really read the lines with the emotion that is in the words. So that's something you can practice as you read poetry. Now, I've chosen this poem specifically because it's beautiful, and it's probably something a lot of us can relate to, not necessarily that exact memory, but having a memory from childhood that stands out, at least elements of it stand out. And also, it's a good poem if you're an English second language speaker, because the language is all understandable. So now let me just check the time. Okay, we will go through it. We may not have time to read through it once more. So no, we will. Why not? Let's do it. So I'm going to read it once more before we go on to the prose. So try and read along with me. If you were listening that first time, try and read along and get the rhythm from what I'm saying. Okay. It Was Long Ago by Eleanor Farjeon. I'll tell you something, shall I? Something I remember? Something that still means a great deal to me. It was long ago. A dusty road in summer, I remember. A mountain and an old house and a tree that stood, you know, behind the house. An old woman, I remember, in a red shawl with a grey cat on her knee, humming under a tree. She seemed the oldest thing I can remember. But then, perhaps I was not more than 3. It was long ago. I dragged on the dusty road, and I remember how the old woman looked over the fence at me and seemed to know how it felt to be 3, and called out, I remember, "Do you like bilberries and cream for tea?" I went under the tree. And while she hummed and the cat purred, I remember how she filled a saucer with berries and cream for me so long ago. Such berries and such cream as I remember I had never seen before and never see today, you know. And that is almost all I can remember. The house, the mountain, the grey cat on her knee, her red shawl and the tree. And the taste of the berries, the feel of the sun, I remember, and the smell of everything that used to be so long ago. Till the heat on the road outside again, I remember, and how the long dusty road seemed to have for me no end, you know. That is the farthest thing I can remember. It won't mean much to you. It does to me. Then I grew up, you see. Okay. Thank you for joining me with that poem. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And now we're going to go to our final thing that we're doing in our speech and drama lesson, which is prose. Now, prose is the term we use to refer to words from a novel, from a book. And so today we're going to read from The Little Prince. Now, you may have heard of The Little Prince. In recent years, it's become very famous. Here's a link to the text I'm referring to. Originally, it's a French book, actually. It was written in French and translated into English and many other languages. It's very famous. And And this is, so it's not actually English literature, but it's something we often read in English-speaking cultures. So I'm going to read a little bit from, if you're following that actual PDF link that I just sent you, what is in the book, it is page 4, chapter 1, page 4. Now, again, this is something you can, all of these things I'm doing, the value in it will be for you to practice reading it yourself. And I know that in this lesson, I can't hear you, so I can't, you're just listening to me. But hopefully you can listen to me read it and hear how I'm doing it and hear sort of how it's supposed to be read, or one way. There's other ways that it can be read, but how I'm reading it. And then you can try and practice that yourselves. You can either practice along with me, you can replay the lesson and practice along with me. This is how I learnt this is how I learnt speech and drama, I should say, is my mother is a speech and drama teacher, or she used to be. She became a maths teacher later, but she was a speech and drama teacher. And she used to record poems for me and pieces from prose like this on a tape. And when I was a little girl, I would listen to them and copy the way she said it. And that's how I learnt how to read poetry and prose. And so essentially you can do the same thing here with these recordings I'm making, and you can practice them in your own time. And eventually you'll get so used to doing it that you'll learn how to do it yourself without listening to me or somebody else read. Okay, so we're reading from page 4, which is the start of the book. And on this page, there's pictures of some hand-drawn pictures. I won't say what they're of because that's what it's about. So we're just going to read a little bit because we don't have much time. But next week we'll actually continue on with this text, so you'll get to read more. So The Little Prince. Once when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book called True Stories from Nature about the primeval forest. It was a picture of a boa constrictor in the act of swallowing an animal. Here is a copy of the drawing. In the book, it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing it. After that, they are not able to move, and they sleep through the 6 months that they need for digestion. I pondered deeply then over the adventures of the jungle. And after some work with a coloured pencil, I succeeded in making my first drawing, my drawing number 1. It looked something like this. I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups and asked them whether the drawing frightened them. But they answered, frightened? Why should anyone be frightened of a hat? My drawing was not a picture of a hat. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. But since grown-ups were not able to understand it, I made another drawing. I drew the inside of a boa constrictor so that the grown-ups could see it clearly. They always need to have things explained. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups' response this time was to advise me to lay aside my drawings of boa constrictors, whether from the inside or the outside, and devote myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. That is why, at the age of 6, I gave up what might have been a magnificent career as a painter. I had been disheartened by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. That's all we're going to read for today. Now, we won't have time to repeat all of that now, but like I said, you can play it back, practice it, listen to it, and next week we're going to move on to the next section. We're going to work through The Little Prince. So if you want to come back for next week's lesson, we'll be doing a different poem, different tongue twisters, and another bit of The Little Prince. And we may also do some public speaking work. We did that in the first lesson. If you didn't watch that, you can go back and have a look at that. So that brings us to the end of our lesson today. If you are interested in improving your pronunciation, well, you can come to these lessons. The other thing you can do is that I'm part of running an online course called the 8 Keys to Naturalised English Speech. And our course is specifically focused on pronunciation. It's not an ESL course where we teach you vocabulary or English in general. We specifically focus on how to pronounce English clearly so that you can sound like a native speaker. And the first month is free subscription, so you can try it out. But anyway, you can follow the link on our YouTube channel to the website if you're interested. Either way, I'll be here next week for our speech and drama lesson, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for coming. Have a great week. Bye-bye.